Brandon Rhiness is a writer and filmmaker. He's from Edmonton. He's known for the movies Hot Box and Grotesque. He's also written several comic books, including Ghoul Squad and The Boy with a Balloon for a Head, the artwork of which I've seen and is crazy. And he's also well known for the horror novel The Man in the Box. That's just like a basic little intro, but I met Brandon actually by working with his mom in Edmonton, and she would tell me about her creative son, and I was a creative guy, so I was like, oh, he sounds pretty cool, and he's doing film stuff. And I first met him when I went to the Hot Box premiere. I don't remember all the circumstances about it, but it was really cool. Like, it was a ton of people there. There was a lot of laughter. It was a really fun movie. I felt a bit like a fish out of water. And that's my introduction to Brandon, and I thought he'd make a great guest. Welcome to Creative InSanity. How on earth did you fall into doing creative things? And was that a satisfactory introduction?
That was probably the best introduction I've ever had.
Right on.
Yeah, like I don't even remember a time when I wasn't doing creative stuff. Even some of the characters, like some of the like ideas I'm doing now, like I remember one of them, like one of my horror ideas I created when I was 2. When I was a little kid, I kind of had this like nightmare when I was like a little toddler, and it's kind of stuck with me. And one of these days, I'll develop that into some sort of project. But even as far back as I could even write, I would write stories. I'd write Star Wars stories that were like kind of like 1 page long, double spaced, probably in crayon. That was like kindergarten or however old you are when you begin to write. And the big kind of change happened when I was in grade 4, and I wrote. I had a dream that I was kidnapped, so I wrote this story that, basically based on my dream that I was kidnapped and I had to escape from this like skyscraper. And then the next day I read it to the class. My English teacher let me read it to the class, and everyone just loved the story. And I was kind of had my little 15 minutes of elementary school fame. So that kind of something kind of clicked there, where it's like, oh, people like what I write. So basically from that moment on, I've just kind of written stories. And in hindsight, I wish I had have really taken it seriously a lot sooner, but I just didn't really. It was just something I kind of did as a hobby on the side. I didn't really like put that much effort into it to actually make a living at it until kind of more recent years. And then I basically lost my job. I got laid off from my job, and then it was kind of like a fork in the road where I decided, do I go out and get another job that I hate, or should I kind of just jump in and go head on into this creative stuff? And this was about like 2014 or something like that.
Okay.
And I was like, you know what? Like, I had a bit of money from, saved up or whatever, and then from unemployment. And I was like, I can live for like probably 6 months. So I was like, maybe I'll just try it. I'll take it a month at a time. If I run out of money, I'll go and get another job. But so I just started, writing like crazy. And I started basically writing and then publishing my own comic books. I'd hire artists and I'd start selling those. And then I'd kind of get hired to write things here and there. And then I remembered that I used to write screenplays, and it had been like quite a few years since I wrote a screenplay. So I started doing that again. And I just started writing a lot, and I got pretty good pretty fast. I started selling scripts, and then I was like, you know what? And then kind of the months went by, and it's like, yeah, I got enough to live for another month and another month. And, I'd just be selling short scripts and getting hired to write things. And I mean, I would be like, living very close to the edge. I'd sell a short script for like $200, and I'd be like, okay, that's groceries for another month. And then someone would pay me like $50 to rewrite their short script, and be like, yeah, it's my power bill for another month. And so I was always just kind of on the brink of, running out of money. But here we are, 8 years later, and I'm still going.
Wow.
And eventually I just led into like, like I'm having some success with writing. I'm going to get back into like directing, because, I'd kind of dabbled in making films before, but not really. And then they started to turn out good, and I made a bunch of shorts, and then we just kept going and going, and the team got bigger and bigger, and kind of more resources came our way. And then, as you saw a few weeks ago when you were out on set, that it's turned into this pretty epic thing, because I just stuck with it all these years.
Yeah, it's really turned into something. And what you're referring to, just for the audience sake, is I came and filmed some behind the scenes stuff for Grotesque 2, the sequel to your film that you've been working on. And I was blown away. Number one, you got so much done in one day. There was, I mean, we had, oh, it was like 3 different locations or something. Weather was not working with us in the evening, so you moved and flexible, changed your mind, and got different footage. Yeah, no, I was there for 2 days actually. I think, yeah, I was 2 days,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was really something to see your process. That like you definitely have a lot of experience, and you know what you want. It was really cool in particular for me to see how you were working with the DP, the director of photography, to like essentially collaborate and be like, you would trust him with certain things. You'd be like, line it up this way. And then I remember we got a take and you looked at him and was like, it was good. And he's like, yeah, it was good. You're like, all right. Like you didn't even look at it. You just kept going. And I remember being like, damn, like that's confidence. He had confidence in his team. That's good decision making. It's time efficient. But before I elaborate and wax on too much about that, I wanted to ask, back when you were a kid, that first initial validation you got from your classmates when people were like, yeah, this is good. How important do you think that was to your development as a writer? And if you didn't have
I
that, would you still be a writer, you think?
Yeah, and I mean, that's we'll never know for sure, but yeah, I think that's like because I remember even like to this day, like I strongly remember that exact moment, and that's when I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna write more," and I even wrote like a sequel to that story. I think I wrote like 3 of them, and people, and that's what I was known for. And it's funny because even on Facebook, I run into um, just old friends from elementary school, and they're like, I remember that story," and um, so that's why it is like it's so important to encourage young people because yeah, if I had have gotten like a negative response or even just complete disinterest in my mind, I probably would have just been like, whatever, like writing's not for me, and I
Hmm.
just would have never shared my stuff again. And obviously, like being 9, 10 years old, however old I was at the time, younger, maybe I can't remember, but like the stories like really weren't that good. I mean, I was a little kid, right? So there's no reason for anyone to give me encouragement because they couldn't tell. I mean, every kid can kind of write, kind of draw, but it's the ones that stick with it. And it's like, well, when you're adult, are you able to do this at a good level? So back then, like there really was no reason to encourage me other than to be nice, So the teacher kind of let me read, and adults would be like, oh, they try to encourage me, but it's like they would do that to any kid. But what really was the validation was just my peers liking it
Mm.
because the kids in class, they can be pretty mean sometimes if you do something that's a little different or odd or whatever. So kids can be kind of cruel. So just the fact that they loved it was the validation where it's like, hey, I'm onto something. Like the people in my peer group that I want to make stuff for like it, and that's kind of still the same today, where it's like, you know, I make my stuff for a certain audience, and they're the kind of ones that it's like when your kind of peer group, other horror fans, for example, when they kind of love what you do, that's kind of the validation that it's just like, yeah, I'm onto something here. That's kind of what you're going for, basically, as long as I like it, and then the kind of people I share it with like it. But yeah, to answer your question, that's like it's life changing to be a kid and just have that kind of support. So that it definitely changed the course of my life.
Mm. I'd want to share just a quick moment I had when I was a kid that echoes of the same thing. Like, I think we've come to the same conclusion, as I distinctly remember examining some of the work that I was encouraged about. Some of the stuff that people were like, "Oh, that's so good," or "Keep going," and it was bad. It was really not good. There's a lot about it
Yeah,
that, critically I could look at now and go like, like you're missing this, you're missing that. Maybe I could point out good instincts at best, but that's about it. But somehow, I remember when I was in grade 10, I started to get into writing short stories and quite a bit. And it wasn't just for class, I was doing it extracurricularly. And I had one teacher, and he was objectively a bad teacher in that he never taught the curriculum. He was like an old hippie who would just like sing songs and roll cigarettes in class. And I think that he wasn't like, I don't think the administration loved him because he was a bit of a rebel and stuff. But this guy, man, he told stories. He was just really engaging with the kids. Like we didn't learn anything we were supposed to, but we learned a lot. And he was the one teacher I remember at that time that I was kind of brave enough to share some of my stories with. And he didn't even say anything besides, "This is really good, kid. Keep writing." Like that's all he said. And it wasn't really good. Maybe it was good for the age, but it was like that did so much for me just to encourage me and keep me going. And it, now a lot of people look at what I do and go, "Oh, you're so talented. You're so this, you're so that." Maybe it was just that I was encouraged, like I had a fostered environment. And it seems like you have the same suspicion for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have there's a few teachers, even some of them I'm still kind of in contact with over Facebook or whatever, but they were just like, yeah, encouraging, and that just helped it out a lot because I couldn't imagine I mean, there's enough adversity in this line of work to begin with. I couldn't imagine if just everyone discouraged you from doing it. It's like that would, especially as a little kid, that would just kind of be crushing. So I'm glad that people are supportive.
Hmm. And it makes you think like how, criticism is a fine line. I think people got to be ready for it, but encouragement does a lot. Maybe people get encouraged too much too. Maybe that's a problem, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I think it's a
yeah.
better risk.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, like, when you're a little kid, everyone needs encouragement because you haven't, it's kind of like when you're 6 and you're trying to try out in sports. Yeah, they kind of need to be encouraged because we haven't seen. There's no way to tell if they're going to be good when they're 19, right? So you kind of encourage them. But I guess once if you're 21 and you're still trying to be a hockey player but you suck, maybe it's
Mhm.
time to be like pick a different career path.
Yeah.
So same thing with creative, right? If I had hit my 20s and it's like, okay, you have not improved since you were 10, that it's time to do something different. But it's just starting off, just having that encouragement made me want to write more and more. And that's really when, I mean, I was like in my early 30s when I really started trying hard. And that's when, instead of just kind of writing when I felt like it, I started just writing scripts like every day. Like I would just like write 10 pages a day for like months at a time, just churn out an incredible amount of material. And of course, what that did was just help me get way better really fast
Yeah.
because just constant practice. And then it was kind of something clicked when I read Stephen King's book on writing.
I read the same
And
book. Yeah.
it was a really good book. Yeah, it's an awesome book. But because a lot of people, a lot of writers, including me, they used to, like, when we do revisions and stuff, we would just add more and more crap to the story. Where he had something in there where he's like, the second draft should be like kind of like the first draft, but minus 80% or minus 20% or whatever. So it's basically like cut it down, omit needless words. So I was like, okay. So I would change it instead of just adding stuff and changing it. I would just start tightening it, and then I would try to make like every sentence just like perfect. And it was basically like right, probably in the same week I started doing that I sold my first script.
Wow.
Because even my you know creative partner in Higher Universe, Adam, he kind of read it, and he's like, yeah, this is like way better now. And it's just like, just that one kind of note was where I got good. So I started changing the way I approach things. And then instead of just, kind of vomiting words on the page, I would make sure I would just make every word count. And just that small thing kind of was the catalyst that just changed me to like actually selling things and making money at it.
Mm.
So then after that, yeah, I would write such a huge volume of material because I kind of had to, right? I mean, if you're selling short scripts for between 50 to $500, like you can't sell one a month. I had to sell like 10 a month just to like barely pay my rent, right? So I would just crank out all this material as fast as I could, and just all that practice got me good, got me better at writing, but it also got me better at writing quickly.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the indie gigs I get, they just need stuff written quickly, and that's kind of what you get paid for. And that's the only way I could make a living.
Well, and it makes me think about how you grow with lots of little things, like finishing beginning, middle, and end, finishing the process many times versus being a perfectionist and working on one project that takes a long time. Like you might put the same amount of effort in, but it seems to me through experience and anecdote that a lot of little things with the same amount of effort that are complete will teach you more. It seems it's like if you
Yeah,
learn lessons from multiple stories instead of just one that you've pined away at forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I bet you if you wrote 10 screenplays that were, fairly good, like that you try put, fairly good effort into, you'd probably learn a lot more than writing one over the space of 3 years that you were constantly tinkering around with trying to perfect.
Yeah.
Even if that one ended up being better than the other 10, there's something about just like practicing every day that's just going to like get you far, right? And it's kind of like learning a musical instrument. It's like you could just play one song to the point of like mastering it, or just practice every day, trying different things and stuff. Like you're just going to learn more by doing more
Mm-hmm.
than you would just trying to perfect one. Because I still know people that are that still have some screenplay from 2014 that they're still kind of working on. They're trying to get off the ground, and it's like
Yeah.
just like I've written like what 75 since then and sold like a ton of them, and I've made multiple movies, and that's kind of where I got to where I am, is just like I have to churn out a huge volume of a huge volume of, I hate to use the word content, but you know, just stuff just to kind of keep the ball rolling, because you need to keep people excited. You need to keep the work coming out, and you need to get attention for yourself. Like I need to basically advertise my work in order to sell my work. So I can't just sit alone in my house, typing away when no one's seeing what I'm doing. I have to have people constantly see my work in one way or another just to be able to make a living at it.
Have you ever wanted to grow your own garden, but didn't feel like you had the space? With food costs rising and concerns over fertilizers and unnecessary chemicals being added to our food every day, maybe you should consider purchasing a hydroponic garden system for your home. Grow clean and fresh produce all year round with the Eden Tower from Hope Innovations. When it comes to growing your own food, invest in the best system out there and discover the joy of regularly having freshly harvested salads, homegrown herbs, tomatoes, peppers, and more with your very own hydroponic system. Engineered to be elegant and practical, the Eden Tower stands above the competition with its patented cup system that allows you to drop a seed and go. You don't need a green thumb to grow some of the most delicious and nutritious food you've ever had. I have an Eden Tower in my home, and we've had it for many months now. My children love it, my wife loves it, and having it supply our table with fresh produce has become a regular and welcome staple to our diet. For my viewers and listeners, get an exclusive $200 discount when you make a purchase at hopeinnovation.ca for your own Eden Tower. Go to hopeinnovation.ca and use coupon code SERVANT to receive $200 off your order. Once again, that's hopeinnovation.ca. Use coupon code SERVANT, spelled SRVENT, to get $200 off your purchase of an Eden Tower. Support the show by supporting them and your own fridge with fresh vegetables and fruits in the process. And now, back to the show. I'm gonna circle back to advertising and self-promotion. That's something I really want to ask you about. But I first just want to ask about when you started and you were building the discipline of writing every day and churning out high volume of things. Did you often feel like it? Was it something you had to force yourself through? Was it a regimen? Was it a discipline? And does it feel the same now when you have putting out high content or a high volume of content, right, for lack of a better word? Is it easier now than it was then, or is it the same? Is it always hard, or was it never hard? I guess I'm curious about that.
It does take a lot of discipline, and it's kind of hard. It's changed a lot, I would say, but like the fundamentals are the same. It's just back then it took more discipline because I didn't know where it was going to lead. Whereas now it's like I've sold scripts before, so I know that I can make money at this. So it's kind of like that part's been validated. So I know if I put this work in, there's a good chance I can sell it. I can get hired to write another script or whatever. So that part is there. Whereas before, it's kind of hard to put work into something where you don't know if it's going to pan out. It's like, what if I spent all this time writing and I never make a damn cent at it? I just wasted years, right? So it took a lot of discipline to just learn this craft and keep doing it, not knowing if it was actually going to work. Whereas now it's been working. So it's kind of like I don't have to worry about that, but it still takes, like, I don't have a job to get fired from. So if I feel like being lazy and I don't work in a day, it's like no one's going to stop me. If I go a whole month without working, like no one's going to tell me to get to work.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's easy just to be like, yeah, I'll work tomorrow, and then 2 weeks go by and I haven't really done anything. So it's hard just to like sit there, especially now when it's like, we're in the middle of shooting a movie, and then we're also shooting this smaller project while we're doing it, and then I'm editing 3 movies and I'm trying to write things like. So it gets to the point where it's like I'll be letting people down if I don't do my work, and I'll also be homeless if I don't work. So you basically just force yourself to
Yeah.
be disciplined. But it definitely gets easy once you have like a bit of a track record. It
Yes.
becomes it just becomes easier to know there's going to be a reward. If I sit down and write the script, there's probably going to be a reward at the end of the tunnel. But no matter what, it still just takes that discipline, and I think that's what stops a lot of people from doing this. It's just writing is hard, and it's hard to sit down and type on the keyboard, and you don't want to be staring at the empty screen or the empty page. So I just kind of got over that, and I just trained myself through repetition to just write quickly. And a lot of it is because, like in the indie world, a lot of the jobs you get, it's not Hollywood, right? So like, a lot of the jobs I get hired to write something, and okay, we need it like by the end of the month. Sometimes even by the end of the week. I got hired to write a vampire script a few years ago, and it was like a ghostwriting job. Basically, it's like you don't get your name on it, but you get paid. It's like a
Wow.
few $1,000 or whatever. But they're like, they need it. Like it was a Monday. Like we need it by Friday. And I was like, oh my god. And they're like, and the person that kind of like brokered the deal, they're like, this guy's movies suck, basically. But they're like, don't worry, like you don't want your name on it, but if you want the paycheck, just do it. So they had a few things like you need to have a scene takes place in a bar. There was like a couple things, but
Oh yeah.
they're basically just like write something. And so I'm like, okay. So I just cranked out the script in a few days, sent it off. It didn't even have a title, and I got paid. And so there may or may not be some kind of bargain bin vampire movie out there that I wrote. But a lot of those gigs you get, right? It's like when you're in indie, it's just like we need to do this quickly, and if I want to pay my rent for one more month, I gotta take the gig
Mm.
and do it. So it really just trains you to work incredibly fast, which pays off in other areas because sometimes when you get those longer deadlines where you actually have a couple months to write it, it's like, oh, that's easy because
Yeah.
I've written stuff in way shorter time than that. So
It's
yeah, it just comes down to just like doing it, right? And I know so many people that plan to make a movie, they want to do their first short film, and then they just plan and plan, and they're waiting on this and they're waiting on that,
yeah.
and then it's like 3 years later and it's like they haven't done it. Whereas like when I announce like something like Grotesque 2, which involves like, you know, hundreds of people,
Yeah.
and it's just such a big thing. Once we kind of decide like, okay, we're doing it, let's set dates, and all of a sudden it's like I just make it happen, or our team make it happen. And it kind of takes that kind of thing where it's like instead of just waiting for this, waiting for this, waiting for, and then
Yeah.
time goes by. It's like so it just takes that discipline to actually do it.
Yeah, I relate to that so much. I feel like in many ways I'm much earlier in my filmmaking career, like taking it seriously. I've been doing rap music and a bunch of other stuff. And I'm at the point where I'm starting to build a team, and it's like the same sort of thing. Like I have it's so satisfying to just have efficacy, to know about yourself that like as you're putting words on a page, if you're really passionate about it and you're going to tell this story, we're going to make this film, that you just have that kind of confidence that things are going to come together, that the right people are going to want to be part of it, that you're going to be able to organize it. It's really satisfying. And it's not a place that I was, when I just started writing or started dinking around with these things, and I think that it's easy when you're starting to lose sight of that possibility and to be intimidated by the amount of work that it takes to get there. But a lot of it is just, like you said, setting deadlines and just making it happen. I know in my case, I had gear borrowed. I had mats for this thing that I had to return to this place for their next tournament. And it was like, they're not going to lend that out to me again. It's like thousands of dollars of mats. So it has to be done by this point. And then I had a venue that was going to let me film there. But it's like, time may erode the goodwill that they're generously sending my direction. So it's like you want to be able to capitalize on this, and that urgency, the project I'm working on, it's like we've been punching through it really fast. We trained in 6 weeks for it. It was like it was awesome. And I see that you're doing that in spades. Like then you have this massive team of people who are just super excited. Okay, I have so many questions for you. It's like I keep all these rabbit trails. Let's talk about this because for sure I want to talk about this. It's self-promotion, this idea of advertising yourself, putting yourself out there. Like, what's your philosophy on that, and how did you come to think the way you do and act the way you do?
It's basically like absolute necessity because I'm a quieter guy by nature. Like even when I was a kid, even through teenager, probably even up through college, I was fairly shy. Like I just didn't talk a lot. I was never one to like, if I had to talk in front of a group of people, I would just dread it. I deal way better just with one or two people, like I don't like a couple friends hanging out with is cool. 15 friends hanging, it's just like too much, I've always just kind of leaned that way. So it definitely does not come naturally to me. But once I started doing this like as a living, I basically had to, right? So I remember even the first podcast I did, kind of, probably 2015 or something. I was like so nervous. I just like dreaded it, and it's funny because even it's probably online somewhere probably, but the host of the show gave me like a list of questions he was going to ask, and I had to write out my answers because I thought I would fumble, and I was so nervous. You can actually hear me just like crinkling the paper and stuff, and whereas now, like for our movies, like we get on the like actual like city news and stuff. And even then, it's like, I just show up and ask me whatever you want. And I've become confident with it just through repetition. But basically, like I need to advertise and promote myself in order to keep this whole thing going. Because a lot of the films that I do, it's so hard to make a profitable movie, an indie film. So a lot of my movies are not profitable in and themselves, but just promoting that movie gets me attention and gets me hired to write screenplays, which is how I make my living. So whenever it's like, hey, we're releasing this new movie, all of a sudden I start getting offers to like, hey, I'm working on a horror movie. You interested in writing it? And so I'll get those kind of offers coming in, or I'll get jobs to like rewrite scripts. So kind of the more I promote myself, the more I get hired. And a lot of the gigs I get hired for is just flat out they saw me on Facebook or wherever.
Right.
They just heard my name. Like we're thinking of a screenwriter in Edmonton, and like we Googled it and your name came up, or we just heard it. And that's just because I promote myself, and not to the point of kind of like bragging about yourself, but just, hey, I'm doing this new thing, or just anything you can to get your name out there. And it works. And it works the same for actors too. Like a lot of the actors I work with, it's just because I saw them. I just saw them on social media. They were doing stuff, and I reached out to them, and then we met for coffee and started talking. And next thing you know, we're working together. You're trying to do a job like this, and no one knows of you, whether it's music or acting or writing or filmmaking. Like no one knows you exist. It's going to be very, very hard to do what you do. So I've just forced myself to, and it still to a certain degree feels awkward, even posting a picture of myself like doing something or holding my book or whatever. It still feels kind of awkward. But I've just learned that I got to do this just to be able to do what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's like an interesting kind of flip on humility, because I think sometimes people think, I think we have a culture that encourages humility. We want people to be selfless and to not be self-focused for the most part. And I know for myself, my upbringing was very much like, don't draw attention to yourself. Don't be that guy. And that's hard when, I'm doing all these creative things that you want eyeballs on it. You want people to pay attention to it. And so my instinct is like, if you see self-promotion, sometimes you feel like, oh, that guy's full of himself, or oh, that guy's this. But it's just this, it's almost like a humility to realize, like if I was truly humble, I would recognize that I have talent, that I have something worth offering that some people may benefit from. I have songs, I have stories, that are worth telling, and that it would be a disservice for me not to at least put it out there, at least put it as an option, and to present myself and have some guts to present myself and say, hey, I'm doing a thing over here that might be of value for you or for you. And it's hard to get into that mindset, but it seems like you're kind of nailing it. Like you're able, you've kind of crossed that Rubicon, And you've gotten to, I think, a very healthy mindset about how promotion interacts with your art and how you get to be an artist by being known as an artist, by being put out there as an artist. It's something I admire and want to learn from for sure, because I think I've been all bent out of shape about it for many years. I've never been good at self-promotion. And I think a lot of people struggle with it.
Yeah, and I think as long as like you could tell, like even just seeing social media posts, you could tell when someone's just boasting about themselves versus someone that's genuine. So as long as you're not basically being a huge douche about it, people are not going to think badly of you because people need to do it, right? It's, hey, I wrote this song, here it is. I made this movie, here it is. Here's a picture of us working on this thing we're doing. I mean, that's what social media is for, right? People are kind of used to it, so people kind of appreciate it, and it kind of needs you. I've heard the phrase like top of mind. It
Right.
kind of reminds people, they see me kind of all the time. They always remember that Brandon writes stuff and Brandon makes movies. So it kind of that helps. Where there's a lot of even actors that I used to work with, but they're just never on social media.
Right.
And eventually, I just kind of forget about them because I don't see them every day. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh yeah, that guy. Like, whatever happened to him? Like, he's not on social media anymore. I don't know what he's doing. But they just kind of vanish from my mind. And other people who are just like always involved in stuff, and even just things. I mean, as cheesy as it is, just like liking and commenting on posts. It just shows that it's like, hey, these people, they're involved. We post something and they're there, and it's like, so they kind of know what's up. And next thing you know, they're more likely to be invited to the set and somehow get involved, and then they start talking to us, and then they're involved in a bigger role just because they're involved in the circle. As soon as you kind of cut yourself off and disappear from public life, then like you kind of get forgotten. So it's why it's like if you're doing some sort of creative stuff, you need to be sharing your work and reminding people like I'm available for hire, and check out my YouTube channel and that kind of stuff. And it's just there's a balance where if you do it too much, like you're just going to annoy people, but a healthy amount, and and then kind of like sharing the love too, right? Promoting other people's stuff, and a lot of what we're doing, like I share pictures of other people on set, the actors in the movie or people. It's not just here's what I'm doing by myself, because that's not true, right? So it's usually like here's what our team is doing.
Yeah, that's been a transition for me too. Not that I never promoted the people who were helping me out, but it's just as I've grown as an artist doing more stuff, I've come to rely on people much more, like building the team. Teamwork makes the dream work, all that. And now I'm so grateful for the people who are regularly participating, helping me film projects or getting involved in the creative process and acting for my projects and stuff. It's like, it's become this much bigger thing than me. And I feel less isolated. I feel less like this lone island who's just out there hammering away, trying to, I don't know, make a name for himself or something. And now it's like, no, I'm part of a team, and I'm building something that's meaningful, not just to me, but to them. Like I'm filming a project with my buddy Dilly and with an actress named Tanisha, whose last name I can't pronounce very well. She's from Calgary, Elena from Edmonton. And it's like all of those people, I want to look really good. I want them to be so proud of this project that like they're promoting it, like they're happy with it. They're thrilled to be a part of it. And that's where I think things can really grow. Are you enjoying this conversation? I really hope so. This podcast, like my music videos and films as Servant, is a labor of love. But the bottom line is that volunteer labor has its limitations, and all of this takes money. For my staff Nikki's hours as she edits the show, for my own hours as I chase down interesting guests and record with them, there's always a cost to producing high-value content, even if that cost is small. Support my artistry as Servant and the show Creative Insanity by buying me and my team a coffee, or sign up for a monthly membership to help me make music, films, and podcasts that are meaningful and worth experiencing. Simply go to buymeacoffee.com/servant. Once again, that is buymeacoffee.com/servant, spelled SRVENT, and see how you can support. Thank you to everyone for listening, supporting, and sharing these conversations with your friends. All of that's very helpful to the podcast. And thank you as well to everyone who supports my music and films as Servant. And now, back to the show. I think an interesting microcosm of what you're saying we could examine is my involvement on the periphery, because like years ago with Hot Box, was it 3 years ago or so when that came
I think
out?
it was like 5 years ago now,
Geez,
probably.
okay, so
Yeah.
this was a perfect like window slash avenue for me, a very creative guy, to get involved in your scene and to start to get involved in projects and start doing stuff. And I did a few right things. For instance, I was genuinely interested. I came to the premiere. I think I was invited again through your mom, through you. Me and you went for coffee. I was really interested at getting involved at composing for film. I was trying to understand more about that. And then I disappeared. It's like, I moved off to Edson eventually and I just did my own thing and I just stopped engaging with a lot of what Edmonton people were doing. And it's only lately that I was like, man, Edmonton's where it's at. Like there's all these cool people and, Brandon's doing great stuff. And now I met Elena and all these other people who are working with you. So I'm working with people who are working with you. And it was like, this is a good opportunity to re-engage, to get to know people who are doing what I like to do and to become involved and present in the scene. And it's like, I think that's exactly what's happening in some ways. You're on my podcast now. We're chatting. I was helping you out on a thing. We've seen each other in social media. I just feel like there's more interaction and it's coming from a genuine place. So I think it's an interesting little, like, you could look at my life as an example of this, of like someone who can fall out, but then can come back in a sense.
Yeah. And if you just look, now all of a sudden, you come out to do some behind the scenes stuff, and now you get to meet everyone on our entire team. And
Right.
now you're, making other videos with people that are from our team. And so, now your name kind of gets tossed around in our group. So if you come back, people now know you as like, they're aware of your existence. So now
Yeah.
if you need to reach out to someone because you need a crew member or you want to hire one of the actors, and so it's like all of a sudden now you just have all these resources because you just reached out and did some stuff. And then, and of course in return it's like, well, now we have you as a resource. And
Yeah.
because before you were just some guy I met, and now it's like, well, now you're part of the team, kind of like you've
Yeah.
been there for a couple of days. And so it's kind of like you just meet
Yeah.
all the people. I always use the example of Sam Al, who's one of our
Oh, I love that guy.
kind of our
He's
core
awesome.
team. And yeah, we met him kind of shortly before Hot Box, but we kind of met him because his stepdaughter worked on our crew, and he would just drop her off, give her a ride. So we kind of met him doing that. But then one day we knew we had a big like flatbed truck, or like a cube truck, and we needed to move furniture for Hot Box. So we asked him if we could borrow his truck. So he did that, and he helped us move furniture around, and then we needed extras to stand in the background and scenes, so we got him to do that. And then next thing you know, we kind of stuck around. He's helping us move lights around, and next thing you know, he's doing like the clapper, and then and then he just kind of liked it, and he got to know us. And then all of a sudden now he's like acting in films, and he's kind of like a main producer, and he's doing all this other stuff, and he's working on all these other films being made in the area. And that it just happened because he showed up and started helping. And a lot of the people are like that. They just kind of join our team, and then they just kind of don't leave. They're just around, and next thing you know, it's like, hey, they're a core important part of the team.
Yeah, well, I mean, I helped out for a couple of days, and like Jamie Clark, for instance, who does a bunch of makeup with you, she came out and helped me for an afternoon. She did some makeup for Elena, and like that connection would have never happened if I didn't come out and hang out. And I mean, part of the motivation too is, well, I think it's I'm a small town guy. I'm in Edson. There are some creative people here. There certainly are some very talented people, and I've worked with and encouraged people to join my productions and do really cool things out here for sure. But there's 10,000 people here, and there's like, how many people in Edmonton? Like, are you guys at 1 million yet? Are you approaching that?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it's like a multiple factor increase, where it's like, if there is a community of people who think like and who like to do the sort of things you like to do, go bring value to that. Go put your efforts into that, and it's going to repay manifold, right? It's going to be something that becomes reciprocal value bringing. You're bringing value, you're having a good time. People hopefully like being around you, and then vice versa. And then they're helping you out with stuff that you really want to get done. And then if you're talented and hardworking and you make something really good, then you're in like your situation where, yeah, you're posting out a video and it's like, man, Brandon did freaking Grotesque. He's working on Grotesque too. I want to hire that guy, or I want to get him to look at my script. You know, like it's a cycle that starts to feed itself very positively in an upward trajectory. I don't know, man. It's I guess I've been away from that, and then I've also been in that, and it's really cool just to see someone like yourself doing such a good job of that, honing all these resources. And you say too, like there's other filmmakers in Edmonton, right? There's other people helming different projects, but it seems like there is so much cross pollination between crew and actors, and it's like everybody almost knows everybody, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And it's kind of funny because I see it from a different kind of angle because like I'm usually like the kind of writer director, so I don't really ever work on other film sets. Like I've only in my entire life maybe only once or twice actually been on another film set because if I'm on a film set it's because it's my film.
Right.
And I don't act or anything, so I have no reason to go to someone else's film set. So I know other filmmakers, but I'm not like an actor where I go to different films. So it's kind of like everyone else. There's like cross, kind of like they'll go work on multiple projects. Where for me, it's like I honestly don't know. I don't even know how other directors work because I never get to see them. So all I hear is when just people tell me things.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of people, especially like once they kind of people join our crew, like even like Jamie Clark, you mentioned the makeup artist, we hired her like right out of school.
Oh, wow.
If I remember correctly, I think she even had to miss her final exams because she was working on Grotesque. But her teacher's like, "Oh, like you got a job in a horror movie doing makeup, like awesome." So they had to like rework her schedule or whatever. But yeah, as soon as she does that, all of a sudden she's getting hired on other things, and so even like Sam Al, right? He kind of joins our team, and then all of a sudden he's working for like all these other teams, and once you start meeting people there, then you start knowing who all the other filmmakers are. And it's like, oh, Jarvis is working on this thing. You should come and join that. And so they'll be working on that one. And then, so it is kind of good. We all kind of work together. I don't know what it's like in like Los Angeles, but I'm sure that it's a lot more cutthroat. Whereas here, like, I don't see any real competitiveness between filmmaking teams because we're all struggling in the same kind of environment and it's not easy. So like all the other filmmakers always come out to like our shows and vice versa, because we just know we have to support each other, and I'm always just like surprised and thrilled about just how helpful everyone is, even people that don't really have a stake in my movie, like they're off making their own movies,
Right.
but they'll still come and like support mine. It's and it's great. I like to go see other people's stuff too, and it's just like it's good to see stuff getting made, and there's not really there's not an air of like competitiveness to it. It's kind of like we're all in the same boat, and we kind of need to support each other to keep going. So it's such like a good environment, and people are very supportive here.
Well, and I think that it would surprise people of how easy it is to get involved. Like, I know if I didn't know better, you just have this idea of like, oh, I want to get involved in film. Like when I was in high school, it's like, man, I want to make movies. I was accepted to go to Vancouver Film School. I was going to go act. I ultimately decided not to do it. And it's like just the idea of being part of a production sounded so, maybe it's because I am a small town guy, but it was like so far, so remote, so impossible almost. That it was like I could only access it if I went through some kind of crazy program or did something. But it's like literally, if someone's in Edmonton and they like are listening to this podcast and it's the first time they've heard of you, if they just friggin' Facebook search you and say, hey, I like what you're doing, can I come help? You will have something to do for them like that. You know what I mean? Like you'll find something, some extra or something. And the next thing you know, like they show up, they have a good attitude, they meet people, they're friendly, they're nice to be on set with. Yeah, all of a sudden so fast things can happen where they're, part of the scene, they're part of the community. And it's like that would be just good knowledge for people to have who I guess want to be involved in that kind of thing, but don't know how easy it is to get involved, I guess, in independent productions. I'm like you in that I'm always just directing my own stuff. And for me, a lot of it has been, I do business promotions and documentary style stuff and all that now professionally, but I do all my music videos myself. And it was bizarre for me to be on set with you and to see you directing. And I was like, man, this is neat. Like it was really cool to see how you did things differently. And that is, I imagine, something that only comes from community, like hearing from other people working with other directors, or getting to go to their films and asking them questions about how they did that shot. Like it's so fundamental and so important. Yeah, I guess I'm just in awe of that. I don't know what else to say about it, but I think it's such a valuable process that's accessible to so many people who so ardently strive to do something creative and meaningful with their lives, and sometimes feel so out of place, like they just can't do it or it's not available to them. But it is, if you just know where to look.
Absolutely. Like, and I get, like, if you're not a part of it, you kind of don't even know where to start.
Hmm.
But now that I'm in it, like you just said, like, I know how easy it is. Like, if I decided I wanted to be an actor, like, it would probably take me all of 48 hours to be on a set, right? I would just know, I would know who to reach out to and who to talk to. And yeah, a lot of it is just reaching out. Like, some of the actors I work with, it's harder now because I have so many more people that
Yeah,
I've
true.
worked with. But when, like, a few years ago when I was starting, like, a lot of the actors I worked with, they would just message me on Facebook and, "Hi, my name's Steve. I want to be an actor.
Hmm.
Like, how can I come work on your thing?" And it's like, "Yeah, sure, come on out." And so then, they'd start off just kind of sitting in the background. And then, the next time I'd give them like a line of dialogue. And then, next thing you know, they do a little bit more. And then they use that to get a job on something else. And then now they're kind of acting in a bunch of things. And so it's just kind of throwing yourself out there. Like, for maybe like the big union shoots and stuff, there's probably some harder process you got to go through to
Yeah.
get in. But for indie stuff like what we're doing, it's kind of like just kind of show up. And like, yeah, the other day we were filming a scene of Grotesque at a church. And so we needed to basically fill this church. So we had like 100 and some extras come out. It was the most we've ever dealt with at one point. But it's kind of good that we've gotten to the point where we just put the word out, "Hey, we need to fill this church." And all these people came out. And of course, as they're, hanging out there, people are introducing themselves and, "Oh, I
Hmm.
really want to get involved." And
Oh, that's crazy.
it's just kind of like, yeah, everyone's just kind of excited about it. So um it's just kind of doing those kind of things just help out a lot. And a lot of it comes down to just throwing yourself out there. And so I used to cold pitch a lot, especially like selling scripts. I would just go to IMDb Pro and look up producers, and I would just email them and, "Hi, my name's Brandon. I'm a screenwriter, and I have this script." And I remember it's probably like 2018 or 19. I spent the entire summer pitching 10 people per day. So it was
Wow.
like 3 months. So it was like a shit ton of people that I was
Yeah.
basically
Wow.
cold emailing. And it'd be like, like 95% of them never responded. Some responded with like, "No, not interested." But there was two or three that were like, "Okay, like, I'll read your script," and
Hmm.
or made some sort of connection with. And then one of them led to um, them hiring me to write a script for them. And at the time, that was the most money I ever made,
Wow.
right? Like selling a script. So it was basically worth it. I had to pitch like freaking thousands of people just to get that one connection. I don't really do that much anymore because I didn't know it's not so much worth my time. But when you don't know anyone,
Hmm.
sometimes just kind of casting out a net and introducing yourself to a lot of people will just start turning into leads. And then you kind of develop some of those. And kind of like we've had a lot of people kind of come and go from our team over the years, and they move away, or they, quit the industry or whatever. And some of them stick with it. And so you kind of develop your kind of core team of the people that just kind of stick with it all the time. And but it's kind of nice just to have so many people working on it. And like I tell everyone, it's like, if you're really interested in this and you come out and introduce yourself and you get along with everyone, like, all of a sudden you got this whole network of people to work with, and you kind of make a whole bunch of new friends at it. And it's kind of like, all of a sudden you don't want to quit, because it's like, it's kind of like, look at this world you've created. Like, you got all these super awesome people to hang out with. Even yesterday I had like Sam and Elena and Caitlin and Jamie all came over to watch the current what I have done so far of Grotesque 2.
Nice.
It was kind of cool that, just invite them over, and all of a sudden you just have like everyone comes over and they're laughing and having a great time. And it's like, um it's just such a like a fun atmosphere. So like, people that just have like a crappy job like I used to have, where it's just like going to work every day was a chore and you just did it just because you need to make a living. It's like doing what I'm doing now. It's just like, I would hate to have it any other way.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that 100%. I'm at the, desperation can create wonderful things when you're in that state of like, you've just been let go. Similar story for me. I was fired from a job, and I was just starting to make money on the side, freelance via video work. And it became like, well, do I go hard into this and try to make this the thing, or do I try to find some other Joe job that I'm going to be miserable with and make better money? And that desperation creates this place where you're, like it's not easy and it's intense, but you have those moments where you've got the crew over, you're all looking at something you've made together and you're celebrating. I'm about to have that myself. Actually, tonight I go to the city. Tomorrow we're filming 2 more shots for this Dance with the Devil project I'm doing with Elaine in that. And then the crew is all going to be hanging out at my brother's place where I'm going to show them a teaser of some of what, we got the photos from the photo session. I've edited a little bit, and we're going to just like celebrate and, have a drink, some snacks. And I'm so thrilled about that. Like, I'm so looking forward to it that, honestly, I think I got to move to Edmonton. I think this is my problem. It's like,
if you're living outside the city, it's definitely puts you at a disadvantage. And I mean, you can always come to the city, but it's just a little bit harder. I mean, Elizabeth Chamberlain, who's kind of like she's the star of
Mildred.
Grotesque.
Yes.
Yeah, she lives in Saskatchewan. So every time she comes here for a movie, she has to drive 5 hours one way just to to get here. And of course, she has a job back there too, like teaching acting and stuff. So if we're only shooting on weekends, that means she has to make that trip like every single week, which could is difficult for her. So that's kind of dedication. But yeah, if you could live in the city, that really helps you out. Even we have people like that live on the opposite side of the city, like way in the north end.
Oh, yeah.
And even sometimes that kind of creates a problem where it's like, oh, I got to go to Jordy's house, but he lives like way the frick far away. And so it's like, if you're living in Edson, it's like, this, sure, it's a fine place, but it's probably not the place that's going to foster the creativity you want.
Yeah. Well, I got a lot of admiration for you. Like, I've always thought you were doing cool stuff based on like what your mom said. Of course, your mom's going to talk highly of you, but like I've met people whose mothers talk highly of them and they're not really doing it. You know what I mean? Like they're not really in it in the same way. And, I've taken art so seriously for so long. I've felt like I'm another animal sometimes when it comes to other people, that when you meet someone else that's doing the same thing, you're like, what? They exist and this is wonderful and they're doing good things for themselves. Like I'm just so encouraged by that. And it's been really inspiring for me, actually. I think one of the best things I did was going up to film behind the scenes on your project this summer because, it's like life goals. You know what I mean? You see it working. You see the crew coming together. Everyone's in a good mood. Everyone's happy to be there. What kind of advice would you give to someone who is just, has this creative inkling? They want to do more of their passion, but they're having trouble, with all the obstacles in life. They got to work a job. They got, all these other responsibilities. Maybe it just seems like a far off fantasy for them to pursue. Like, what would you tell them?
Well, there's no way around it other than like you eventually have to do the work, right? And it comes down to like the planning and preparation obviously is part of it, but people end up getting stuck in that, and then life happens and they're just working on this thing that they're going to do one day. Whereas I just like set deadlines. A lot of people, you have a 9-to-5 job, just whenever on a weekends, whatever your days are, like save up money. Just find out, okay, if you want to make a film, just write something that has like 2 to 3 actors in it, takes place in your own house or in somewhere that's easy to get, and just kind of ask like, hey, what does a sound guy charge? What does a director of photography charge? And be like, okay, so to hire them for 2 days would be this much. And then be like, okay, you know what? I need $3,000 or whatever just for a skeleton crew. Save that up, set a weekend, and then to just make it happen. And because, they would say like everyone's got some crappy movies and some crappy scripts. You got to get through that too, right? Like your first one's going to be not very good, and your second and third one are not be very good, but eventually you'll get better at it. And so it's just a matter of like cranking those out. You could film it on your phone if you want. I mean, I started doing it before that technology existed. We'd shoot on VHS and just whatever I had to do. When I grew up in Wetaskiwin, I would just volunteer at the little cable TV station And in exchange, they would let me borrow the equipment whenever it's not being
Oh,
used. So it's
nice.
like, all right, so I'd have a video camera, and then I go in at night and edit it on the VHS machines, and just kind of like whatever I had to do to do this, I would just do. But it's usually like a lot of times I even set deadlines before we're even kind of ready, because I know it's like you're never going to be ready, and there's always going to be an excuse, especially dealing with this many people that you have to like organize. And it's kind of like, people have jobs and other things, and
Hmm.
so if you're just kind of like tentatively going to do something, it's never going to happen. Whereas we're like, you know what, it's like, okay, June 5th to the 10th is when we're doing this. And all of a sudden people are like, oh, okay, I'll see if I can take the time off work, or I'll arrange my holidays for then. And it kind of makes it happen, because people have even been shocked when they like meet with me, because sometimes I'll meet to like, partner with someone on something.
Hmm.
And I'll be like, okay, so like let's set a date. Like, and they're like, right now? And I'm like, yeah, right now. Like, so I'd be like, okay, so how about we'll do it like 3 weeks from now? And it's like, oh, like I'm away that day. It's like, okay, the following weekend. And it's like, okay. Because it's like, as soon as that date's set, it's like, okay, let's tell everyone we're doing it. Let's book the crew we need. And all of a sudden it's like, crap, now we really got to get to work because it's happening.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was like, hey, let's just talk about all the stuff we could do, and it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
6 months later you'll meet them again, and oh yeah, we really should do that, and then it doesn't happen. So, like even with Grotesque, like I got to thank Julie Whalen, my co-producer, on the first one, because yeah, I think we had like a bit of money from Hot Box or something, or we knew we could raise a bit of money. So she's like, let's just start shooting it, and then hope the rest comes in, and if we kind of start shooting it, that'll hopefully get people excited enough to
Yeah.
get it going again. So we did that. We just started shooting, and we had to deal with COVID and other crap, so we had to shut down because of that. Um, but eventually, we would just like raise a bit of money, shoot a bit more, raise a bit more money, shoot a bit more, and it took 2 years. We finally got it done. So for Grotesque 2, it was kind of the same thing. Like we didn't have enough money to do the whole thing. We had enough money to do a little bit, so we just started doing it. And of course, once you start doing it, it generates excitement, and other people want to get involved.
Hmm.
And then other people are like, if you guys need money, like I can kick in a little bit, I can kick in a little bit. And then it's like, okay, we got enough for another day. So we book another day, and then, and we just kind of kept going, basically fighting for like every inch of, work we needed to get done. And then here we are, on this coming Sunday, we're shooting the last day of Grotesque.
Yeah. The
So it's like
24th,
it
right?
worked. Yeah, the 24th. So it's like, yeah, it was hard, but it all became because you know what, we are doing this. If we had have like waited until we were ready, we still would not have even done the first Grotesque. We'd still be, oh, we need more money. We're waiting. We're waiting. We're waiting. And obviously, there's a certain amount of effort. You can't just. I couldn't just say, hey, we're doing a movie tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it comes a time where like it doesn't become real until it there's definite plans. So if you kind of tell people that I have this thing I'm working on, they're like, yeah, everyone's working on something, and most of it never happens. As soon as it's like, okay, you know what, like October 1st we begin shooting, everyone's like, oh, this is real, and then all of a sudden it's so much easier to get it going. And even yesterday at our little meeting, I announced the big project we're going to be shooting next summer, and there wasn't any sort of kind of like hesitancy or kind of like, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it, that kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
thing. It was just like, I said, we're doing it. And basically, I mean, there's a lot of work needs to be done, and we need to raise money, but there's a pretty much like a 99% chance it's going to happen, because we've done it before. We've made several films. Everyone's confident enough, like we know how to do this. So like we're going to find a way to make it happen one way or another. And once we start shooting, we'll either do the whole movie in the month of July, or maybe we'll shoot 4 days and then we'll have to stop it for a couple months until we raise more money. But it's like, I'm going to make it happen, or we are going to make it happen.
Yeah.
So that's what it comes down to, is just having those plans, right? Is there's people always kind of want there to be a way around the discipline of having to do it. But it's just not going to happen, right? Everyone's working on stuff, and maybe people have this dream that, I wrote this script and someone's just going to make it for me and make my dreams come true. And
Nah.
that's just it's not going to happen. It's like you got to
make
do
it
it
happen.
yourself,
Yeah.
and you got to do it over and over to get good enough to have people finally take notice. And that's why I kind of cut my teeth just making a lot of short films, just to kind of meet people and practice on things where there wasn't the stakes weren't as high.
Hmm.
if you like raise a bunch of money to do a feature length film and then you screw it up, it's like that's a pretty big blow to your ego and to your reputation.
Fair
Whereas
enough.
if it's like a 1 or 2 day shoot, it's like, okay, even if it sucks, it's a good learning experience. And then of course a lot of those little short horrors I made, I just recently compiled them into a feature length horror movie, like an
Yeah.
anthology that I released. So it's like even those other things, there's ways you can use them, so they're making money on my YouTube channel, but then I compiled them into a full-length movie that I released. And so if you're kind of smart about it, like you could just all the stuff you make, there's just different things you could do. You know, honestly, if I could go back to when I started, like I could just do it better and faster, right? But I had
Yeah,
to kind
same
of
here.
learn as I go, and as I sure everyone will, right? It's like no matter what advice you get, it's still going to come down to you doing it yourself, and you're going to figure out your own way, and things take longer than expected. I mean, everyone, even back when I was, in high school making these, crappy short films on video, I figured, oh, I'll be a, millionaire by the time I'm 23. I'll be a famous director, and life kind of quickly teaches you the lesson that is not going to happen, and you have to basically be in this for the love of it, and we all are. And there's people of all ages. Even a lot of the people I work with are older than I am, and they're just kind of in midlife, just like, hey, I want to make a movie, and then they do, and it's like, hey, this is fun, and also now they're making
Hmm.
stuff, and it gives you like a feeling sometimes that you may not have had in years of just like doing something new and meeting new people. And it's like, even if you never make a ton of money at it, it's still you're making something that could theoretically outlive you, right? It's like
Right.
you wrote a book, you wrote a comic book, you made a movie. It's like this thing is out there and it exists, and it's something that people can never take away from you.
Yeah, I've come to a place creatively where the thing you're doing is the reward in and of itself. Like, how wonderful, how glorious it is that I can, sit down and write a script or write some music and plan an album launch and go out and film and just make it happen. Like, even if like almost no one saw it, that I could do that I could have the experience of making that thing is,
Hmm.
so re- revitalizing and so good and so important. And this, it kind of, for me, this circles back a little bit to something you said earlier, which I wanted to comment on. It was that once you start doing stuff, there's like proof that you can do stuff. And I notice intimately in my career as a filmmaker and a musician and stuff like that, that is so much the case. It was like you're getting your first music video put together, like I'm doing it on a cell phone, like getting people involved. It's like, no way. Like it's so, nobody believes in you. But as soon as you put something out that's decent, that's kind of like that shows a bit of that talent, or that people start to see that, then it's easier. Then people are like, oh, I'd like to do this. And a perfect example now, it's at the point, I'm filming this project with Elena, for instance, where I put her through 18 hours of fight training and choreography that she's like worked so hard for. And one of the things that convinced her to do it, I know, was she watched a previous project of mine, 7 Songs for Life. She saw that and like she was interested, we were talking about it, but after she saw that, she was like, I'm down. Like whatever it is, let's
Yeah.
do it. Let's make it happen. Let's put the work in. And so now it's like it's easier. I guess it was easier for me to secure such a hardworking, talented actress for a project like this, where I couldn't have done that before if I didn't have the pedigree, if I didn't have the track record.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Like even yesterday, she mentioned to me about being part of your video, and she's like, she's kind of basically like, I don't want to be part of something that's going to turn out to be horrible.
Right. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, seeing that I have a track record, it's like, oh, okay, this could be good.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I remember when I first started, like when I first really started doing like quote unquote real movies, like 2015. It was hard. It was hard to get people involved, even paying them. Sometimes it was like they're
Yeah.
just like, well, they want to get involved in this thing is going to turn out to be a piece of shit. Like they just don't know.
That's so
And I
tough.
remember just trying to find like everything, like trying to find someone to let you film in their house. It was just damn near impossible. Whereas now, like we're getting too many offers of
Mm-hmm.
to shoot at people's houses, and even for Grotesque 2, we it was like the day before we were going to shoot that scene, and we needed Julie's character to have an expensive car, and we were so busy that we hadn't found the car yet. So we're like, okay, let's just in our group chat of all the core team, let's just
Yeah.
put the word out. We want an expensive car, and somehow we found a friggin' Lamborghini. that they gave us for free.
That's
They actually drove out to the location, and hey, we got this Lamborghini to film. And that's just like we've gotten to that point where it's like, oh, someone has a cabin on a lake, bam, we got that. And like we
mm-hmm.
just kind of, it just became so much easier because our team has grown so much. We have more people, and also people have seen what we're doing.
Yes.
Whereas before, like you ask for a favor and they're like, who's this guy? Whereas now people kind of know, oh, Hot Box, Grotesque, like
Yeah.
if I'm involved in this somehow, or my house or my business or my car is or whatever, it's going to turn out pretty good. So all of a sudden now you just like have a track record, and it gets easier and easier to make things happen.
Yeah. So I could keep talking to you very easily. And what's good about this situation is that I know I get to talk to you more. I'm going to see more of you in the future. We're going to be crossing paths. I'm going to try to get involved where I can. And yeah, it's been a pleasure getting reintroduced to you and what you've been up to these days lately. I do want to kind of give the floor to you. This is, I guess, my final question. And that's, this podcast is called Creative Insanity. And a lot of what I ask people about who are hyper creative is how on earth do they stay sane? When it seems like, we're an odd shaped puzzle piece, we don't seem to fit the world a lot. And I see a lot of people who are very creative go down a very dark path psychologically. You seem rather well-rounded. I guess it's like, what's your tips for sanity? Or like, what's something that you're doing that keeps you sane or that's really important to you to keep you psychologically well?
Oh, that's a hard question. I don't know if I am. I just luckily I think a lot of it is I got my my whole drinking substance abuse thing kind of over with before I started this, when I was in my 20s, before because I would hate to be trying to do this and have that in my life. It just wouldn't work. So I kind of got that out of my way. So I got basically all the the darkness of life that I was living. I got that out of the way, and then that kind of changed into like, you know what, I'm going to start following my pursuit. What I should be doing in life. So that part makes it easier. And a lot of it too is just like being responsible. I know a lot of artists just kind of have chaotic lives where I just force myself. It's like, I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to be responsible with money, all that kind of stuff. And I'm very careful of who I let in my life, just whether it's personal or business. Because if it's people that are going to be stirring up trouble and strife, it's really hard to deal with when you're trying to work and be creative. So I'm just like, I just try to be grounded and live like a normal life. But I love it too. You got to embrace your weirdness, I guess, for lack of a better word. I mean, so I think all of us to some degree, we're doing an abnormal job. So we're all weird in our own kind of way, that we've just chosen a different path. And part of you have to just realize like, that's the way it is. So, I'm not going to try to fake that I'm a doctor or lawyer, some sort of normal job. It's just like, yeah, I write and make horror movies. It's kind of fucked up when you think about it. In my world, it's just like, oh, everyone does that. Like, I assume everyone makes movies, but it's like, no, it's actually very, very few. It's actually there's kind of an oddball kind of job.
There's horror films, and then there's like Brandon Rhiness horror films where there's like another
that too. And mine are kind of bizarre in their own way, but it's like, yeah, you get the kind of weird looks and comments sometimes, but it's like, for the most part, people are like, oh, like that's cool. And even my parents, who like, they've always been supportive, but they never really watched my stuff or anything. They were just supportive because they're supposed to be. But then when they watched Hot Box and Grotesque, they're like, I think they were like, oh my God, like these are actually good. Like we were there, they were just kind of trying to humor me, but they're like, these are good. And they're not horror people like at all, like not even close. But they came to the Grotesque premiere, and then they like watched it again on their own, and I was like, what? I'm like, that's weird. And then it's like, oh, and then my aunt and uncle would visit, they'd show it to them, and my brother would visit, they'd show it to him, and now they're like excited to be in part 2, and they actually came out to be extras at the church. It was the first time that they've actually like seen me working. And so it's kind of like, even people that are like, what the hell, like you make horror movies? But once they kind of see it and kind of get involved, they're like, oh, actually, that's kind of cool now that you mention it. And, I kind of had an idea for a movie I've always wanted to do. And all of a sudden you kind of realize that I think part of everyone wants to do this kind of stuff. Everyone kind of wants to express themselves in some way. So I really don't have any tips of staying sane. I think as long as you're living life and you got a roof over your head and you're, somehow making a living, then, maybe you just got to kind of embrace being strange, and that might even benefit you.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think that yeah, I'm still kind of like reeling from it. I think there's a lot that I've got to process, and hopefully my listeners have something to process as well. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm going to cut it right. This podcast is produced by my film company, Red Reach Productions. We specialize in business promotion, documentaries, and cinematic storytelling. Based in Edson, but serving the whole of Alberta, Canada, and beyond. Check out our client testimonials and reach out to discuss the film project that you have in mind at redreachproductions.com. Thank you again for listening to Creative Insanity.